Hi everybody. Thanks very much for coming and making it on the month later than it was already going to be. It's all been very complicated, so thank you very much for having me back again. It's been very complicated, but we're glad we're here. Right, first order of business. Some of you may know me from YouTube, you may not, but this is going to be recorded on YouTube, which means we have to do a sound sync, which means I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and everybody's going to go clap, and that means my mic is going to be synced to that camera. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then clap, okay? Not letters. It's always one. Right. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Brilliant. Right. Okay, thanks all very much for coming today. We're going to be looking at how to get your photographs from the holiday snaps to something a little bit more akin to travel photography, something that actually maybe says something about the place and the people and the food and the culture and the religion and the clothes and all the wonderful things about where you've been. So we're going to be taking a look at some of that today. So first of all, a little bit about this dude, just because most of you probably won't have the faintest idea who I am and why I'm here. So I don't know if you can read all that very squishy writing up there, but I am a self-confessed photography nut. It started when I was 5 years old, and I got given a Boots. You know those little 110 roll film cameras? You remember those? I got one of those, and it just delighted and fascinated me, even though it was the most wonky camera in the world. And every time you pressed the shutter, the camera tilted, and so everything came out blurry. But that was me hooked, and my dad at the time had an OM1, a proper, beautiful manual camera, and he showed me that by moving little dials and levers and switches, you could make pictures happen. And that was it. From then on, I was hooked. So now that sort of fast-forwarded, 30-odd years, and I now basically make my living doing it, mainly for doing portraits and doing bands, like press kits of bands, that kind of stuff. I do other commercial work as well. And I also do workshops, both here and in other countries around the world, where I teach photographers and people that are interested in photography how to get better. And that's one of the things that I'm most passionate about, is getting people into this thing that I've just found a love for in my life, and getting people to appreciate some of the little techniques that you can use to get things better. So I'm going to be having a look at some of that today. I'm the founder of FramedPlanet.com. That's a international, no, it's not, that's not the international, there's one underneath it. Framed Planet is it is international. It's a photography news and entertainment website, basically. All of your daily news, all of the gear reviews, all of the stuff that's going on in the photography world. If you go to FramedPlanet.com, it's all on there. And when you sign up, when you get onto the website, there's a big orange box that says sign up here. And if you don't, a kitten cries. It's true, so do that when you get home. I'm also on F-Stop Lounge. That's an international collective of photographers from all over the world, and they are basically there to help photographers and people who are interested in photography get into the thing that we love. It's set up partly in Australia and partly in Germany. For those of you that can make it to Fiji in October, then there's a workshop out there with Elia Lacardi and Benjamin Von Wong, all these people there doing the F-Stop Lounge workshop. It's like 7 days of just madness and fun on the beach. So come along to that. I've got a YouTube channel, which again, you should all subscribe to immediately if you haven't done that. That's got lots of interesting reviews and cool stuff on there. And if you've got one of those internet things at home, if you go to mattwidgery.com, you can see all my pictures. So, what are we going to learn today? Well, let's have a look. We're going to avoid how to avoid gas ruining your holiday. For those of you that don't know, that's gear acquisition syndrome. It's the biggest killer in the photography community, and will ruin your holiday if you take too much clobber. We're going to learn how to stay married and avoid the divorce course. Most of us are not going on a photography-specific holiday, although we'll come on to some of the things that you can do later on. But most of us are going with our families, with our friends, with our loved ones who may not be quite as lunatic about photography as we are. So we'll be learning some of the ways that we can juggle those things. So that's that. We will be learning how to make 1,000 pesky tourists disappear in broad daylight without a gun. And we'll be learning how to come away with a set of photographs that are actually worth something. So that's the overview of today's talk. So don't let gear acquisition syndrome ruin your holiday. And I can't read this because I'm looking at too small a screen. Oh, look there. Apologies if I keep turning around, but that laptop's really far away. Basically how to pack what you need to take great photos without needing a Sherpa to carry it around with you. Basically, we as photographers like to acquire stuff. And the temptation is that when we go away on holiday, we want to pack a couple of DSLR bodies, a 14 to 24, 24 to 70, a 70 to 200. Maybe that 300 2.8 is going to come in handy, you never know. Probably a few flashlights because you're never quite sure, and maybe the studio strobes as well. Definitely an iMac to put it all together. Maybe a couple of soft boxes would be a good idea. And by the time you get all of this stuff, it really you spend so much time worrying about the gear that you miss the photo. So Henri Cartier-Bresson, in his personal work, obviously when he was shooting on assignment for Magnum, he used whatever lens was necessary to get the shot. But for his personal work, he only used a 50mm lens on his Leica, and he was fine with that. And I don't think anybody here would probably question that Cartier-Bresson did some pretty nice photographs. So what's quite nice about photography, like any creative medium, is that actually by limiting the gear that you take, you open up creativity. And that's something that's probably counterintuitive to most of us. We think that if we could just get this extra lens, maybe something really, really wide, that's the thing that will make our photographs look great. But actually, what's really interesting is if you just get used to shooting with one focal length, you start to see that focal length as a frame, an imaginary frame in your world as you walk around. And that's wonderful because it means that you can see the photo and where the edges of the photo are going to be and what's going to come in and out of frame before you get the camera up there. So you're thinking like a photographer now. You're not thinking about the gear or the lens or the settings. You're just saying, wow, look, there's the photo, and you've got it. So actually limiting yourself is really important to open up creativity. You will miss some shots. There's no doubt about it. Occasionally something fabulous will be happening way over there, and you're sat there with your 18mm on the front of your camera. You will miss it. But you will get more shots that you would have otherwise missed because you start to see the world in these frame lines. So it's quite a nice thing to try with. For street photography, I use these cameras. These are little mirrorless cameras made by Fuji. This one's the XT1. These have got a smaller sensor than a full-frame sensor. These is an APS-C size sensor. So that means that the 18mm lens that I use on this for street photography is equivalent to about 28mm. So it's pretty wide, and I do miss some of the stuff that's further away. But I like to get close. I like to fill the frame with things that are happening right there, because I like people to be able to feel they can reach in and touch the stuff that's in those images. Now, occasionally, you see something in a magazine, something exciting. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No. It's a super zoom. Now, super zooms are quite cool for doing travel photography. If you are wanting to go on holiday and you don't want to take just a prime lens with you, you think that's going to be too limiting, one of these, and I've got one here on this one, is a really useful idea. What these do is they go from very, very wide. This one goes out from 18mm out to 135, all in one lens, okay? So that means that you've got something to do portraits, something to do landscapes, something to do a bit of wildlife shot, to take pictures of your food and things like that. Pretty much everything. It's a Swiss Army knife of lenses. And so this is quite a useful thing to have if you don't want to take a bag full of lenses, but you still also don't want to just take a one single, 50mm or 35mm lens. So let's have a look at some of the pros of using a super zoom. It's got a wide amount of focal ranges in there, which means it's useful for doing all kinds of photography with. You don't need to change lenses. I mean, that's really, really important. Chrissy and I, in our last workshop out on a Greek island, we were shooting on a desert at one time. There's wind coming in with sand in it, and then when you get that into the body of your camera, it ends in tears fairly quickly, and you've ruined really expensive clobber. So having the one lens on there that doesn't allow the sensor to get exposed to all the wind and the scrot and the rain and the dust and the snow and the other things that plague us as photographers, that's kind of nice. And just one lens is obviously a lot lighter than carrying a bag of lenses with you. And you can also, they tend to be cheaper than some of the ranges, some of the zooms with a shorter range. Certainly it's cheaper than a 24-70 or a 70-200. Most of the time, if you're a Nikon shooter, for example, there's like an 18-200, which can be had for around £300 or £400. And I think Canon do something similar. It's still a chunk of change, obviously, but compared to the thousands that you can spend on glass, it's pretty reasonable. The only difference is Fuji, for some reason, they decided to make theirs like 800, where everybody else makes them for half that money. It is a very good quality lens, and it's weather sealed and things like that. But nevertheless, they do like to charge us through the nose for our stuff. The cons of a super zoom, I mean, obviously, it's a Swiss Army knife, but as you know, if you've ever tried to do, if you've tried to repair your car with your Victorinox, right, it's not the perfect tool. It'll get you out of a lot of scrapes, but it's not perfect. It's got a variable aperture. Now, for those of you that don't know, with your lens, if you've got a variable aperture on it, what happens is that as you zoom in, the picture will basically get darker. The aperture tightens down. It's the same if you've got a DSLR with the kit lens that came with it, something like an 18 to 55. If you have a look on the side of that, it says that it'll go from f3.5 to usually f5.6, or in some cases even f6.3. And what that means is that when you zoom into something, you're then going to have to slow the shutter speed down or boost the ISO up in order to get the correct exposure. And that might cause problems if you're shooting indoors and at night, where you're already perhaps at the maximum of what that lens is able to do. The optics of a zoom lens are never as good as primes. It's just a fact. There's more glass in it. And every time you get light that comes through glass, what's happening is that it's not got 100% transmittance. So some of it will bounce back out. So the more elements you've got in a lens, then by the time it gets to your sensor or your film, if you're shooting film, there'll be less on that sensor. And it's not very bright, the lens, hopefully, not the photographer. It might be both, you never know. But you may want to pack with you another lens, maybe a prime, something like a 50mm 1.8, which can be had pretty cheaply, or maybe a 35mm 1.8, to go alongside your super zoom, just so that at night when you're going out and you're at the restaurant or you want to go and see something at night, you can open up the aperture to something that's a lot brighter and have that light gathering ability. So it's worth bearing in mind if you're going to go down that route. Right, now there's two schools of thought when it comes to getting cameras. And by the way, most people that are going to go on their next trip are probably not going to go out and buy a camera specifically to go on that trip. However, it is always nice to talk about gear. And if you are in the market for a next camera, we're going to have a look now and sort of just drill into some of the things that would make a good camera or not. So do you either spend more money to get better photos? If you go and buy that 1DX, is that going to make you a better photographer? Or is actually the best camera the one that you have with you? And actually, can you take a lot just with your smartphone? The answer is, of course, you can. There are many, many brilliant photos. If you go and look at Chase Jarvis's website and have a look at his iPhoneography stuff, I mean, it does this killer stuff just with an iPhone camera. However, if you are in the market for a camera that is going to be used for your holiday and your travel photography, there are a few things that, if you bear these things in mind, will help you out a lot. And the thing I've put first isn't first by accident. This, after all other considerations, this is the most important thing. It's size and weight. And I know there's a lot of people that will be in here poo-pooing that, going, no, nonsense, I'm going to carry my 4x5 around with me on holiday. I'm big and strong and I don't mind. Believe me, when you're carrying this thing around like all day on your back, you begin to hate it. I made a huge mistake. The last workshop I did with Chrissy, I was just transitioning at that point. I hadn't gone fully over to the mirrorless cameras, and I was just transitioning. I had a set of Nikon Pro DSLRs, big, chunky, heavy, evil things. No, they're not. They're lovely cameras, but they weighed a ton. And so what was happening was that I was carrying around this DSLR system and a mirrorless system, and I took them both, which was nuts. And I just regretted it. And after the first day of carrying the DSLRs around, I just left them back at the hotel. Yeah, it was just horrible because you don't enjoy the day when you've got this big camera bag around you. And if you've got one of these rucksack bags that's kind of like smashing into people when you're trying to get into pubs or into museums, I mean, you're that photographer, right, that just gets in everybody's way. So having smaller, lighter gear, you'll love it. You really will. You'll never look back. Low light capability. Most cameras these days are pretty good at it, so this is less of a concern than it used to be. However, sensor size still does have an impact. With cameras, if you go for full frame, it's going to be able to gather more light than APS-C, like these have, and that's going to be able to gather more light than Micro Four Thirds. Micro Four Thirds are now getting so good that you're able to get probably the same with the Micro Four Thirds as you were with full frame less than 5 years ago. It's astonishing what can be done. But by the time you get down to the little tiny sensors in your smartphone or in little compact cameras and things like that, you will notice that the light gathering ability is less. And if you are planning to go and shoot inside museums or at night or maybe in caving and that kind of stuff, you'll struggle to get the shutter speed high enough to not get a blurry image. So if you're starting from scratch and you're looking at buying a new camera for travel, consider that. Consider the low light gathering ability for that one. Weather sealing and toughness. I mean, with the best will in the world, we're going to go on holiday. We're probably going to get pissed and fall over at some point. We really don't want to break the camera when this happens. I don't know just a raise of hands who saw the picture of the Leica that fell off a balcony and broke the granite step recently. Did you see that? It's amazing, right? I'm not saying go out and buy a Leica because it's quite expensive, but the point is that it's a tough camera. This thing fell off 4 stories, landed on a granite tile outside a swimming pool in this hotel, and the guy was just freaked that his $6,000 camera had bounced down all these, onto the ground. And he ran downstairs, and the granite had cracked and broken off a chunk, and his Leica was fine. He had like a scuff on the side of the lens hood, and the rest of the camera was all right. So bear in mind weather sealing and toughness, because you never know if you're going to get caught out in the rain, if you're going to get caught out in even dust and things like that can affect your camera, or even just the way that the baggage handlers in the airport will be just doing rugby passes to each other with your camera bag as they throw it through customs. This can have an impact on your gear. Try to go for something that's got like a magnesium chassis with some weather sealing if you can. Cost is always an issue, I know, but these things are getting cheaper all the time, and there's nothing at all wrong with hitting the second-hand market. And choose something where the manual controls are easy to get to. You don't want to be looking for that shot and find that to change ISO, you have to go into subsection 3.4.1-A to get to ISO. You want something on the surface of the camera that you can change your exposure triangle. So your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO, you want all those 3 things at your fingertips so that you can not worry about the settings in the camera. So other stuff you probably shouldn't forget while you're on your holidays, because there are a few other bits of, I would say, essential travel gear. Some may disagree, but these are things that I like to pack when I'm going around with me. So other useful bits and bobs. Tripod. You might not want to take it every day out with you, but when you're out there and you want to be doing, and we'll come on to some things where you would definitely need a tripod for in a bit, but even if you want to do something really cool, like, having sort of like those shots of waterfalls where all the water turns to smoke, or you want to do some night photography, things like this, it's just really nice. Or even just be able to have like a selfie with the family. Just having a tripod that you can prop up somewhere and put the camera on is really nice. Carbon fibre stuff. This one here, this is a carbon fibre thing, so it's lighter, and they're cheaper now than they've ever been. So in the old days, you used to have to carry these big, heavy aluminium tripods around. Those days are thankfully gone, and now you can get pretty lightweight tripods that will still give you enough, you'll be able to put a decent sized camera and a decent lens on there. As I say, good for astrophotography as well, if you want to do those star shots. If you've gone to somewhere, with perhaps you've got to see the pyramids or something and you want to get the Milky Way in the background, you need a tripod to do that. So that's that. Other bits and pieces, filters. Filters are good for various reasons, not least, and I haven't put it on this list, but actually if you've got a filter and it's on front of your lens, it'll protect it to a certain extent from things hitting it. So, again, little bits of dust and grease and grit and things like that. When you got a little bit too drunk at the restaurant and you put your chicken basket fingers on the camera to take a picture of somebody, it's easier to wipe it off the uncoated, nice, clean glass filter than it is to do it off your expensive ED-coated glass that cost you 1,500 quid. So ND filters, these will basically cut down the amount of light that your camera sees. Some of them are variable as well, so you can actually turn them. They're like circular polarizing filters, and they'll get darker depending on which way you turn them. But the point about that is that you can actually slow down the shutter speed in daytime. So if you wanted to get one of these shots of a waterfall with smoke and things like that, you can do that during the day. Or if you wanted to do a portrait of somebody and have the background blown out, then you can do that with, without having to boost the shutter speed up higher than the camera's able to do. And you can do making thousands of pesky tourists disappear in broad daylight. And we'll come on to a slide, the next slide, by a wonderful French photographer, how that was done in Paris, and we'll talk about that in a bit more. ND filters, polarizing filters particularly, they're going to cut out glare from glass and water as well. So if you want to do shots of lakes where they look really clear, you can do that with an ND filter, and also glass as well. If you want to take photos of things in like museums through glass, then you've got reflections. A good set of filters will do that, and in sky as well. It's going to bring out all the saturation and make the sky really, really blue. So that's a really nice thing. So this is by Etienne Gaboreau, and she's a wonderful photographer. As you can see, this is a really cool sort of description. You can go further than this. She's actually left the shutter speed slow enough that everybody turns to ghosts, which is rather nice. But if you left the shutter even slower, all these people that are just kind of ghost images would disappear. So if you sat there and you get off like the tour bus and there are 10 trillion people, they're all with cameras and backpacks and picking their nose and slapping their kids, and that's going to spoil your lovely shot, you can actually make it look as if this is they've cordoned the place off for you. It's wonderful. So I would recommend you do that. But you need to have some filter in front of the lens that will allow the thing to basically go almost black, so that you have that shutter open then for like minutes on end to get back up to daytime. And then all that minutes that the thing's open for, the people moving around, there's just not enough of them registering on the sensor as it goes past, and they'll disappear altogether. So that's quite cool. So more on filters. Graduated filters will be darker on the top than at the bottom, unless you put them in the filter holder upside down, and then they look stupid. So the idea behind those is that you make the top of the camera, the top of the picture, darker, because that's where the sky is, and the sky is going to be brighter. And then the bit that's underneath, like the foregrounds, where you want your people or your buildings or whatever it is, you want them to be more in the same exposure range so that you don't have a blown out sky. There's nothing worse than having a look at a really lovely photograph and seeing that the sky, which was all blue when you remembered it, or like even a nice moody sort of cloud sky, has just blown to white. And so many times we see that. And so if you have a graduated filter, you can help out on that quite a lot. Other bits and pieces. Do not, under any circumstance, go anywhere for any reason without at least one spare memory card and spare battery. There is nothing more miserable on God's earth than getting to the most fantastic location. You're at the Grand Canyon at sunset, and like an eagle just flies down past you, and like its eye glints in the evening sun, and you bring your camera up to your face and it goes out of memory or out of battery. You will throw yourself into the canyon, and that'll be the end of your photography career. So for the love of God, just take some. They're tiny and they're cheap. Like you can put like half a dozen batteries in your pocket and it's not going to weigh you down. The only thing I have to say with these, if you're used to shooting DSLRs and then you go to mirrorless, these things eat batteries like a fat kid on cake. I kid you not, these things are just dreadful with them. If I get 300 shots out of this, I'd be lucky. With the Nikons, I was getting like 900 or 1,000 or probably more. So it really does pay you. But, you know, they're cheap. They're really cheap. So you don't need to spend a load of money, you know, and it's just worth it. And the same with the memory cards. I recently got a 64 gig ultra high speed 2 card, like the new cards with the double row pins thingies, and it was like 25 quid. So you can get like the 16 quid ones for like, you know, no money at all. So yeah, both can fail unexpectedly, both can fall in the sea, and yeah, it basically just kills your photo shoot very, very quickly if you don't have those things sorted out. So just word to the wise, you know, learn from, well, I've done it, you know, learn from my mistakes if nobody else's. So camera bags, you've probably got a camera bag already, and if it's one of those ones that's branded up and says low pro in big letters or Nikon or Canon on it, there are, depending on where you go in the world, but a lot of places in the world, they kind of know to look for photographers because they've got expensive gear. So they'll be looking for bags which are branded and say things that look stealable on them. And if you go around with like a camera bag, and it's the same with your camera straps as well, if you're using the camera strap that comes with your camera that says Nikon D4S on it, guess what? You're going to get a conch on the back of the head before you get back to the hotel in some places in the world. So take those things off and put unbranded things on. And if you do have a camera bag that's got a label on it, just a bit of black tape on there will cover that up. If you're starting from scratch and you want some advice on buying a bag for travel photography, get one that doesn't look like a camera bag. So many of them now, people like Think Tank, and there's other manufacturers as well. This is a Billingham bag. So these, they don't have any logos on. I mean, it just looks like a day bag. They don't look particularly like they've got anything in them that's massively stealable, and I would recommend you go down that route. Well, yeah, if they know it's a Billingham, then they might, but if they don't, then you never know. So yeah, and then if you're looking to buy a bag from scratch, then get something that's smaller. Like deliberately make yourself buy something that will only fit one body and maybe 2 lenses in it maximum, so you're not tempted to just hoover up every bit of gear you own and drag it onto the plane. Right, how to stay married and avoid the divorce calls. The issue is that when we go on holiday, the reality is that we're not going just to take photos, unless we're going on a specific photography trip, which we will come on to as one of our top tips. But the reality is you're going to be there with your family, and you're going to be there with your friends and things like that. So, you know, if you get up at sunrise, so when me and Chrissy, we went to shoot this, I was the only person that wanted to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go and shoot this. But by the time we got there, you know, everybody sort of, you know, was more amenable when they saw the light. But you don't have to drag your whole family. Like we were there on a photography tour, and it was a photography workshop, so it was one thing. But if you just get the idea that you're going to get up and go and shoot, you know, sunrises, just let them stay in and meet them at breakfast. It'll help you out a lot. And if you do spend all of your camera on money on camera gear, just save enough for the hotel. So, you know, just bear that in mind. Right, so some more tips for a pleasant trip for everybody. Yeah, basically, don't keep them waiting. If you're travelling with non-photographers, friends, family, kids, and you go somewhere and you want to, you know, take pictures of the Eiffel Tower, whatever it is, you're kind of off to Disneyland with the kids and you stop like halfway down the road because you've seen like all the pylons really neatly match up to like sort of some mountain in the background. Don't stop the car and spend 4 hours getting the tripod out and matching everything up. Take a shot by all means, but just be aware that, there are other people that might not be as loony as we are about these things. And find some time to go out and shoot when the rest of the family are doing other things. No doubt the kids will want to go and play somewhere. No doubt, maybe they're with a wife or husband who's not interested in photography, might want to go and explore the town, do a bit of shopping, get a pint on, let them go and do that, and then you can spend some time doing photography without just annoying the crap out of everybody else. So that's kind of nice. And the top tip, and this is the big hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, book a photography-specific holiday, and then you can indulge your passion with like-minded people and under expert guidance. And it just so happens that that's what me and Chrissy do. So talk to us if you want to come out and shoot in Greece and other nice places. So the meat and potatoes of it. Now we've covered gear. This is now the how to make our photos better. Now we've got the gear element sorted out and we've not upset the family. Let's have a look at some of the ways that we can improve our picture taking. So first thing, light matters. Right, this is just a grab shot. It's just taken out the window of a 4x4. But, it's just the sprinklers going off. It's just the way that they irrigate the fields out there. It only looks remotely interesting because of the light in the picture. It's because the sprinkler is backlit and you've got the sun going down behind the mountains. If you take that shot at 2 p.m, it's not a shot. There is no shot there. It's just boring. So be aware that the light is so much about the picture. Just getting something that, try and find the nice light. And that will help you out. Again, I got at 4:30 in the morning to do this. If you go back at 11, like you decide, or even 9, like even if you decide that you're going to get up, go and have like an early lunch, an early breakfast at the hotel, then you're going to kind of like, get a croissant or a coffee, you're going to slope out the house. By the time the sun is like over the horizon, this doesn't look like this anymore. All of that light has disappeared and it wouldn't have been a picture. So it's really important to remember that stuff. However, the reality is, mostly the light stinks because mostly we're doing stuff during the day. The kids don't want to get up at 4:30 in the morning. You might be hungover from the night before and you might not want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. The tour bus is going to leave at 10 after the good light is already over and it's going to get back at 5:30 before the good light starts again. So you're going to have stinky light for most of the travel photography that you do if you're going on holiday. So when you've got the sun that's above you, you're not going to have lovely soft shadows, any of that stuff. So you're going to have this harsh light that's happening. And so, try and find the gaps between buildings or sort of little bits where you've got these shards of light that come through and revel in the harsh shadows, revel in the contrast. This dude, if he would have been a foot that way, a foot that way, a foot that way, he wouldn't have been in this shaft of light. He's just in that shaft of light, just looking confused, angry, lost. I don't know what he's looking, but regardless of what it is, he looks like he's kind of been lit by a big sort of, studio light. And it's all natural light. But, just be aware of where the light is and don't fear the bright and the shadow. So much of the time as photographers, we're told, you can't shoot in this light because it's too harsh and the sun's overhead. But if you then start to expose for the highlights, and bearing in mind that's if you're shooting on digital, which I guess, who's shooting? Anybody shooting film here? One? Okay, so in your case, shoot for the shadows. Everybody else in the room, he's got his... What's that? What's he got? He's got... Is it Nikon F3? FE. Very nice camera. Really, really nice camera. So unless you're shooting film, everybody else who's shooting digital, you need to be exposing for the highlights because that's the first thing that will wipe out of a digital file. So you can bring the shadows up later if you really want. But I would also say that if you find interesting stuff and wait for that to go into the highlight area, into that bright shaft of light that's coming through, let everything go to dark and then you've got some difference between the foreground and the background. And you'll find that all over the place when you're on holiday. Like everywhere is going to be middle of the day and you're going to find little sort of glints of things between buildings. It's not that difficult, but when you know to look out for it, you can make a real difference to your pictures. Photo series can be much more informative to somebody that you're showing the pictures to than just single grab shots. These were just 3 people on the island of Lemnos where we were out a couple of months ago. And individually, okay, they kind of give you one segment of the story, but by the time you start to put more pictures together and you put 3 and 5 and so on, you start to get a feeling for the people on the island. You get a feeling it's a little bit more of a story there. You get to understand a little bit more about their way of life, and you get to see the differences in their faces and the similarities and the differences, and all that stuff makes more sense when you've got more of one of a thing together. So when you're shooting, start having these little series in mind. So, be aware that you can shoot, like a series of people or a series of churches or a series of, whatever it happens to be. Like, you could find statues and just do them, whatever it is. But try and, make a story out of that can then be useful for people later on when they're looking at your pictures. And if you can find a dog's arse to put in there, that will just finish it and that'll be the perfect picture. So I'd recommend that. And it's about the people, not the places. I mean, this is Dimitri. I love this. It's not, it's not the best photograph in its world of Dimitri there. It's not particularly well lit. He was in a dark boat, and I didn't have any flashes to make the light look particularly dramatic. But he was a real character, and you can see the glint in his eye. He's a proper legend, this guy. He's like a double-R bastard, basically. He does like deep diving without a scuba suit, and he goes down and he gets sponges. And he dives down there, like down into the sea, and he'll hold his breath for like 3 minutes, and he'll wrestle these things and pull them up again, and he does all this fishing and stuff. But then if you add that picture into the other two pictures, so like this is his navigational compass. So this is where he goes, and he goes, right, okay, there's a shoal of fish over there. That's the direction I'm going. So that's his tools of the trade. And then the one underneath, this is taken from there's a castle. This is Myrina and Lemnos. There's a castle up here. That's his boat there. And that's the restaurant where we ate his fish. So his boat comes in there, and then we ate there at the restaurant. So it's kind of like you've got the wide, and you've got the close-up detail, and you've got the man himself. And when you look back at that in 20 years' time, you're going to remember more of the story than if you just look at it and go, who the bloody hell was that bloke? Do you know what I mean? So if you give it some context, then that will help you out a lot.
What's your, if you go back to the photos before...
Yeah, that one.
Of the lady in the dog's arse.
The dog's arse one, that one, yeah.
What's your approach in terms of, because sometimes when you take pictures of people like that, they want money or something like that. Do you have a typical...
I mean, it depends. Like, she was just a widow in the town, so she wasn't, panhandling or anything like that. It depends on the situation. I have no problem with, if somebody's obviously, homeless or in desperate need, I have no problem with giving them a couple of quid. Absolutely no problem with that at all, because I'm asking for them for something, and in those cases, there's absolutely nothing wrong with, buying them, a sandwich or giving them a couple of quid or, getting them a coffee or something like that. And then, in exchange, you can strike up a conversation, maybe get to learn a little bit more about them as well, because it says in the next slide, it's about the people more than the pictures almost,
Well, I wasn't sure if I was perpetrating a self-fulfilling prophecy where it just encourages.
I mean, yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? And it depends what you're doing. If you are, like, say, for example, if you're doing a project on drug addiction and homeless people on the streets and things like that, you may want to give them, like, food or coffee rather than money if you think that that's going to be just helping their addiction, things like that. So, play it by ear and kind of use judgment. But as a general rule of thumb, I mean, I try not to, I'm not, they're not paid models. I want candid shots and things like that, but if the opportunity arises to help somebody out and just to say thank you, then I will. And there's absolutely, I would recommend that, because at the end of the day, if we can go through the world and just make things better by going through it in any way, regardless of if we've got a camera in our hand or not, but if by what we do, then the world can be a nicer place, that's good.
It's true that there are cases where the government doesn't want you to do that. So if you go to Marrakesh, they ask you not to give money or anything to people begging.
Right, because their panhandling is going to be worse for the next people. Yeah.
In Vietnam, they were literally dragging kids out onto the street.
Right.
And then somewhere there'd be someone watching them.
Yeah. I mean, anything like that, obviously check with embassies and things like that, and check just the rules to where you go. And you're right, there's a lot of places where it's not, appropriate.
The dog's obviously taking the cash there.
The dog's got all the money there. But the dog's doing the most work, so, I mean, he's really working it.
So you'd ask permission.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in these, I didn't ask permission. These are all candid shots. Most of what I do a lot of street photography, so most of what I do is candid. I prefer, unless I'm doing like a portrait session with somebody where I'm going to spend a bit of time with them, getting that kind of rabbit in car headlights look out of their eyes, which people get as soon as you put a camera on them, or that thing.
The Afghanistan thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm much more about finding those little moments. And just finding the kind of looks on people's faces that they would have naturally, So, again, it depends where your comfort level is in that and what your particular style is as well. Some people want to be doing more, say, like the Afghan girl, like that's, Steve McCurry's gone and he's taken her and he's got her to look and she's got this piercing look and stunning. I mean, it's a really amazing shot and it's a posed shot. Then the flip side of that would be, somebody like Bresson, for example, who would do all his stuff candid. He'd kind of like set the camera up somewhere and kind of wait for cool stuff to happen. So it does depend on where your comfort level is in approaching people on the street. some people don't like taking candid shots because they're frightened of what people will say. They're going to get punched in the face if somebody, if they get caught. So there's that aspect. Obviously, Dimitri invited us onto his boat, so this is more of a paused, a posed deal. He wasn't just about, although he had some bloody big fishing knives and things tucked away. So yeah, you want to be on his right side. He was a double-eyed bastard as well. He could have taken down a bear with one hand, I think. So the journey is more important, or as important as the destination. So this was a day we went out with a local photographer. That's the other thing. If you can meet with, and again, it depends what your schedule is and who you're there with. But if you can meet local photographers and go out with them, they'll find all the cool places for you to go. So we went out with a local guy, Stratis, who was taking us on this trip to all these cool locations, and we were going out to this church on this island. And then on the way, we had to stop. That's his van. He owns like a mini mart thing, like a supermarket thing, and that's just his work van. We were just bouncing along, and the four-wheel drive could hardly keep up with him in his Berlingo. It was amazing. And at one point, this herd of sheep were just going across the road, and I just jumped out and took that because it described the journey as much as the destination. And the little bird flying off, that was just a bird that had just got down inside of by the side of the road, and we just scared him up into the shrubbery there as we drove past. So I just hung out the window and managed to get him as he flew by. And for me, it's those little moments that just remind me of the journey and just bouncing across those rocks to get to there. And I actually prefer those photos to the final thing. It's the travelling. Get close. I mean, again, it depends on what your comfort level is with photography, but all of these were shot on an 18mm lens. It's about 28mm equivalent, and so I'm right up in these faces. I'm closer than I am to like Chrissy and Marine. I'm kind of here to take like that. I'm there, right? I can reach out and sort of pat his head and nick his hat from this angle. But that gives the photos a presence because you're invited into the world of these people and you can study them, and because they kind of wrap around you, it gives the characters more of a presence. It makes them larger than life, and I just enjoy that. So practice with a wide lens and get close to people, and that will help you out. Don't be afraid to just try stupid shit. I mean, this was done in a hotel pool, and obviously, this is Agnes, who's a student, and when we'd done taking pictures for the day, she was saying, I'm a swimmer, can you take some swimming pictures? I was like, yeah, cool. So we're mucking around, and the easiest thing would have been to just kind of do this, just the standard swimming photo of somebody going through the water with all the kind of things going everywhere and the wake behind them and all that crap. But instead of which, I was getting her to dive in, and I was literally lying down on the side of the pool, and then again with a wide lens, so I could pretty much grab where her foot is. And these splashes were just coming directly towards the lens each time. So as she was diving in, I was just doing that to make sure the camera didn't get fully soaked and the action was all blurry. But just do stupid stuff. I don't know that it's necessarily the best picture of a person in a pool ever, but it amused me to do it. And that's part of the plan. Just think outside the box. Don't be afraid to try things.
How many pictures did you take to get that one?
That took about... I didn't do burst mode, but it took, I think, 5 or 6 goes to get that one because I wanted to get her just in the water to there, and because she's going in fast, it's the timing thing. So sometimes she wasn't entirely in the water, other times there was just a splash and no person. So it took a few goes just to get right. So, but 5 or 6, I think after probably 10, I'd have given up and tried something else. To be honest, it wasn't that important. If I was there shooting for a client, I might have stuck at it a bit longer. But yeah, so that's that. Try different techniques out. This is a technique called flash and blur. Does anybody know about these techniques? Show of hands. 1, 2. Anybody else? 3, 4, a few people. So basically the idea behind this is that this is taking a picture of a cycle race. And the thing about the cycle race for me was the noise and the colour and the movement and all that sort of stuff. And if you're just shooting this stuff at 2,000th, 4,000th of a second and you're freezing the action, you don't really get a sense of that. It's you don't get the sense of the race and the urgency and the action. So what I did was, and you can do this on anything, if you want to kind of shoot cars going by or runners or anything, what you do is you slow the shutter speed right down and pan with the movement and then fire a flash into it. And the flash goes off fast enough that it'll burn in the exposure of the riders at the point where they go, where the flash is. But everything else will be all blurry and you'll get the motion of the thing going by. So you get, you can read all the, stuff on the bikes and the stuff on there, but the rest of it's just blurry. It gives more of a sense of movement. So try that out. If you're, it works really well if you're somewhere where there's dancing and music and festivals and things like that. Slow the shutter speed down. Maybe play around with the camera movement a little bit, get it going around a little bit, and then fire a flash into the middle of it. That will burn in the dancer, but there'll be lovely swirls and cool stuff going on around it. So it works a lot when you're travelling and all that kind of stuff. Think like a photojournalist. if you're out shooting like an event, as a photographer, you're trying to get the 360 degrees. So this was happening just off the side of a stage at an event I was shooting, and these are the organisers. And so some of you might recognise this was Cambridge. This wasn't particularly fancy. This is Wes from Shindig Gigs and Faye from Allographic, who you may well know. But Wes obviously killing it in his top hat and black wing combo, absolutely smashing them dead, and Faye with an equally dapper chapeau on there. And so just these little moments, like she just leaned over for a minute to say something about levels, but just capturing them between there. So be aware of what's going on around you. If you've gone somewhere and you've gone to the Eiffel Tower and you've done like the shot that everybody wants to see of the Eiffel Tower, that bit of grass in front of it, and you've done that, look around and see what else is going on, because you may well find that there are little scenes, little vignettes that are happening around you that actually are the really interesting things. And again, it will remind you of that day when you come back to it later on. So think about all the things that you can include in your story. The food of the place, that'll be different from the place you go. So, take pictures not just of the food on your plate, but of the plate, like the markets and the farms and all that kind of stuff. Take pictures of the people and all wonderful ways that they dress and the expressions on their faces, and just the fact that people around the world look different. They've got different faces, and that's really nice. And you can be reminded and built into a place and locked into it with your mind a lot more when you go and take pictures of the people, and they tell you so much about a place, about the culture. What's significant about their particular way of living that's different to your own. I mean, that's the reason we go and travel different places. It might be. I mean, unless you're going, some people just go and they go halfway around the world and they don't ever get out of the hotel resort, or just for the sunshine. Yeah, sun, beer, food, and a beach. But you can kind of get those in a lot of places. Not the UK necessarily, but beer and sunshine is the same the world over. Yeah, exactly. Whereas part of the reason for going to different places is that things look different and are different, and that's nice, and it's entertaining, and informs your life better. The religion of the place, the history, the landscapes. What does it look like as a landscape? How is the wildlife different? So be thinking about all these little things as a photojournalist and how to build them into your story when you get home. And then finally, think about how you're going to display these. Are you going to just have these on Facebook? Are you just going to keep these, on a file on your computer somewhere? Are you going to make a few prints, but, in no particular order? Or are you going to do something really cool with it that you can remember later? And these are great ways of doing them. These photo books, they can be had for not much money. You can get them for like 15, 20 quid, and you can paginate them in really interesting ways and get all your photos to look nice, and they're in a hardback book, and you can show that to somebody and take them on the journey with you, and you can limit it so you're not doing 1,000 images as well, because nobody wants to be that person to show somebody their 1,000 pictures that they took on that holiday. But if you show them your best 50, they might be interested, particularly if you've got these other things in mind, so that they then sort of learn something about it. And then by the time you look at that book in 20 years' time as well, that's going to be a nice memory for you, and maybe even for generations to come in the future. So that's it. That's the end of my talk. Anybody got any questions about that? Thanks very much, guys. Thanks.